protection against divorce to another level. And I'm telling you, it really is something that is needed. When you look out there, you're going to see that on YouTube and other outlets, there's just a ton of bad news for people getting raked over the coals during a divorce. But before we start with the horror stories, let's start with a little joke. Okay, so the new Barbie movie came out. Guy goes to see the Barbie movie with his little girl, and she loves it, and she wants a new Barbie. So he goes to the store and he starts talking with the salesperson, and he's like, "Look, my daughter wants a new Barbie. I don't know what to get." All right, well, look, we've got a couple of options. We have Beach Barbie for $19.99, and we have Dr. Barbie for $19.99, and then we have Divorced Barbie for $349.99. The guy goes, whoa, 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 $349.99. Why is that one so expensive? And the salesperson, without missing a beat, goes, "Oh, it's because it comes with Ken's house, Ken's car, Ken's furniture, and half of Ken's 401k. Okay, funny joke, unless you're actually Ken. So there's just an awful lot out there in terms of these divorce horror stories. But then you only hear of, well, okay, should have had a prenup, as if that's actually going to be enough. And it may not be, but there certainly is an awful lot more that can be done to protect your assets if you're going to get married. But you want to make sure that you're keeping your stuff separate, they're keeping their stuff separate. If things don't work out, well, all right, you've got a plan for what happens with your stuff. So let's kind of jump into the meat of the webinar, the divorce firewall strategy for professionals. So why do I do what I do? Well, I think it's a little more of why I do things the way I do things. I'm a planning attorney. I'm not going to go to court. I'm not handling litigation. I'm not cleaning up messes. I am helping people who want to prevent problems from happening by planning ahead and doing it the right way. And in that sense, I think I'm actually unique. Well, not unique, but definitely rare among the attorneys that are out there. A lot of attorneys make money when people have some sort of crisis, whether they create the crisis themselves or not, and they're in desperate need. And so the clients pay them a lot of money to handle whatever the problem is. On my end, I want to help people set up the right documents, systems, and strategies to help them avoid these problems from happening in the first place, or very much mitigate whatever disaster may come along. So that's why I do what I do. So I am Jeffrey Marsacci, the Plain English Attorney. I've got more than 27 years of experience as an attorney. I'm also a certified Medicaid planner, author of 9+ books. We're actually up to 10 on Amazon, and the creator and producer of online courses available at plainenglishattorney.com. And my goal for today, review the basic concepts of this divorce protection planning from a high-level view. So we are going to go into, here's what the different components are, here's what the components are designed to do, but we're not going to get into a ton of detail. That could be a whole other webinar on each of these components, and it's entirely possible that we will do that webinar, or maybe even create a course to go with it. Review protective planning from the inheritance perspective of parent to child. And, well, the inheritance from parent to child is something that I've been working with quite a bit. And in fact, after the lockdowns, this was an interesting statistic, about 34% jump in divorce rates right after all the lockdowns happened. So that first year out, big jump in divorces. So I had a lot of my clients coming back to me and asking for help because they wanted to make sure they had to protect what they're leaving their child from their spouse. There'll be more on that as we get into it. how the elements of the divorce firewall strategy work together to provide advanced and enhanced protection. And then we're going to talk about the ideal potential clients. So really, this webinar is for attorneys who do estate planning proactively. Not, okay, let me give you a quick, simple will and it'll go through probate and that's where I'll make my money. That happens an awful lot. Not because necessarily they focus on pushing you into probate, but in a lot of cases, estate planning just isn't their main thing. Yeah, they can do a will and they can draft these documents, and there are templates out there that are commonly used and accepted by the state bar, but it is that very basic stuff. Maybe they do planning with revocable living trusts, and it's a little bit more, and it's planned around avoiding probate for estates, but we're talking about the simple stuff there. So when we're talking about looking at your ideal clients and the strategies and the elements, we are talking about going deeper. So the vulnerabilities and pressure. So really here, we're dealing with two different, almost diametrically opposed forces on young adults. There's this pressure from the family. Oh, you need to get married and have kids. You have to get married and have kids. Oh, yeah, no, well, why aren't you married? You're 23 years old. Why aren't you married and have kids? You're 27 years old. Why aren't you married and have kids? And then there's all that pressure. Get married, get married, get married, get married, get married. And then at the same time, there's, oh, but you need to be in love and don't get a prenup because, oh, that just shows you don't trust them and that's starting out the marriage the wrong way. And you hear all the other stuff. On the other end, there's all of those horror stories that people can now communicate very easily because of things like Reddit, YouTube, and other forms of social media and information distribution that are having people just show this is a bad idea. Marriage is a bad idea. Well, no. Marriage isn't a bad idea. Marriage without protection is a bad idea. So essentially what you have is if you go ahead and get married, you're accepting the state's contract between the two of you. You're letting the government determine the legal binding terms of your relationship as opposed to putting it together yourself, titling your assets the right way, and protecting yourself, not necessarily even from each other, but just so everyone's on the same page. Everybody knows exactly what the deal is. So you've got these pressure from diametrically opposed sides. Now, let's talk about the real risk of losing 50% of everything, 50% of the time. And there are some figures that show 40% to 60%. So let me explain a lot of this. There's a 50% divorce rate. Well, hang on. The percentage odds of you having your marriage fall apart is about 40%, maybe a little higher. Well, why do you hear this 50%? It's because 50% of marriages end in divorce. There's a bunch of people getting married 2, 3, or more times and still getting divorced afterwards. So that pushes it a lot more up towards that 60% level, because I believe it's somewhere around 60% that if you get divorced and get remarried, there's about a 60% chance that you're going to get divorced a second time. So, funny story, I actually tried out doing divorce in my very first year out of law school and setting up my shop. All right, let me try divorce. And I said, let me go down to the courthouse because they have the state forms that they were selling as a packet. They couldn't just give it out because there were so many people wanting these copies of these papers to fill out. So I'm standing in line at the clerk's office to get a copy of this packet. And there's the guy in front of me looking, and it was like $6 for the packet. Like, $6? Last time I was here, it was only $4. And the guy behind me says, "Oh, hey, buddy, I remember when it was $3. This was my third time here." Okay, they obviously didn't learn. Now, I realized pretty quickly I hated doing divorce, but you can see that these divorce rates, there's a lot of people who are getting into marriages and then getting divorced more than once, and that's where you've got a little bit of variation in the statistics. So we can protect our clients even if they do get married by taking advantage of things like premarital agreements and other types of agreements, LLCs, and the Domestic Asset Protection Trust. This is something that not a lot of attorneys even really know about because it's not available in all states. However, a lot of the states that do have Domestic Asset Protection Trusts have a way for your trust to come under that law, and we'll explain that in a little more detail. So, in-law protection planning. So, this is a little bit beyond the standard revocable living trust and the protections that it has for avoiding probate, but you can also build in, just say you've got, I got 3 kids. I want everything to go equally to my 3 kids. If one of my kids passes on, then, and before I do, then I want their share to go down to their children. And if there aren't any children or no children then living, it goes to the other 2. Very typical. It doesn't go to the spouse. Yeah, that's very, very typical of planning in the United States. Saying, I want everything to go to, say, my son. If he dies, then I want it to go to his wife. And then if she dies, then it goes to their kids. Oh, no, wait a minute. It goes to the grandkids. It bypasses the spouse, and there's a trustee in charge of it. But this is all very dependent on who dies in what order. Because if the parents die and then the kid passes on, then they receive the money, and they may leave it to their spouse. So this is where we had a problem and an issue. After the lockdown started getting lifted, my clients were coming in and they were saying, I can't believe what's going on in my son or my daughter's marriage. I thought I knew my son-in-law. I thought I knew my daughter-in-law, but apparently I didn't. I need to make sure that if I'm leaving anything to my son or to my daughter, that they can't turn around and leave it to that awful person that they're married to, or somehow or another they could lose it in a divorce after we leave them the money. And this is the very typical situation that happens if parents pass on and a kid gets a bunch of money. The spouse may be whispering in their ear and saying, hey, honey, now we can get that dream house we always wanted. They don't need a mortgage. They find the house. The real estate attorney goes, oh, well, okay, yeah, you're married, so this is going to be tenancy by the entirety. And now suddenly the spouse has their name on a house completely paid for with an inheritance. Marriage falls apart, but that house was bought with my parents' money. Yeah, but you commingled it. I talked to a divorce attorney, and that's what they told me. All right, you're losing half the house. To avoid that in-law planning, that next step, is simply not leaving it to the kids outright, but setting up asset management trusts. So those 3 kids, each one will have their own asset management trust. So their inheritance goes in. It's there for life. If they're going to buy the house, the trust will buy the house and hold the house. And now they can live in the house. And if the spouse takes off and starts cheating and wants, I'm going to start my next best life and I want half the house. Well, your kid doesn't even own half the house. The trust does. So they're out of luck. So that's the type of planning we did a lot of. And there's also an element of having IRA trust to handle the tax deferred money as it goes down. So you could spread it out over a 10-year period as opposed to if it went to the trust, it's an equal 5-year split. You're going to be able to maximize income tax savings. And then the way we typically set it up, same 3 kids, those IRA trusts after 10 years will just pay into the asset management trust. And now it's there for life. And it has to go to the grandkids after they pass on. So that's the in-law planning piece of it. So you're using asset management trusts and IRA trusts to receive it, lock it up for the child's lifetime, spend money as needed, but it's not like they're getting a huge chunk of money. And now, because of the terms of those asset management trusts and IRA trusts, it's going to be immune from lawsuits against the child. But this then brings about the next level question. How can we protect the child's assets that they grow and accumulate on their own from divorce? So that's really that whole next level. We're planning for the child, not just with the parents' inheritance, but with their own stuff. How are we going to protect them from the downsides of a potential divorce? So here's where we have the divorce firewall strategy. It's multiple layers of protection. It's not just a prenup. And you hear that all the time. Yeah, get a good prenup. Well, yeah, you can have a good prenup. You can have a bad prenup. I joke that there's a whole bunch of prenups out there that people downloaded and filled in with crayon, and 17 years later, they're shocked and chagrined that the prenup didn't work. It got thrown out. These prenups aren't worth anything. Well, no, a bad prenup is worth nothing. A good one, it goes pretty far, but it doesn't go all the way. And the way I look at it as a planning attorney, it's sort of like you could have the best drafted will. It's going to do exactly what you need. It's going to take care of all these different contingencies, but it's still going to have probate court oversight. It's still going to have all of those complications and inventories and all that other stuff. But it's a pretty good one. Just like a prenup is going to spell out, here's what you keep. Well, we're going to go into court and we're going to contest it. Well, good luck contesting, but you're still in court. You're still in court, and it's still at risk. Here's something that I really don't think a lot of attorneys understand. The anxiety that their clients go through, knowing that a lot of their stuff may be at risk, as opposed to if it's completely off the table in an integrated strategy like the one we're talking about now. This divorce firewall has multiple ways to protect the assets. So let's keep moving with this. So yeah, the premarital agreement, one layer, but it should be integrated like a trust is with powers of attorney and a will. So a revocable living trust system has the revocable trust. You've got the assets. They're going to avoid probate. What if you become incapacitated? Well, that's where you need a power of attorney for actions that take place outside the confines of the trust. Signing tax returns, applying for benefits, Social Security interactions, things like that. Then you also do need a pour-over will. So there's this will, if you pass on, all right, it directs whatever does end up in probate and have to go through that rigmarole over into the trust, but it shouldn't be much because most of the stuff is in the trust or directed to go elsewhere. So it's all together. That's the way we should really be looking at a divorce firewall strategy, is to protect it with multiple layers and multiple documents. So the biggest of these is the Domestic Asset Protection Trust, and the one that I focus on in my book, the Divorce Firewall Strategy, as well as when I'm discussing it, is Wyoming's. Are there other states? Yes, that's fine. But a Domestic Asset Protection Trust is an irrevocable trust. You set it up. You're the beneficiary. You're the trustor. You're the person putting the assets in. And you want to have lawsuit, bankruptcy, and most especially divorce protection? Well, wait a minute. This is sounding a lot like a revocable trust, and you don't have divorce protection with that. That's true. So here are the trustees that you have. Now, I say 3 trustees, but the way I generally see it, it's technically 2 trustees, but the third one almost acts as if it's a trustee. The first one is the benefits trustee. This is the trustee who can decide whether or not you have access to your own assets. So there's that trustee standing in the way of you being able to get and utilize your assets. If you have a house that you put in there, that benefits trustee is the one who says yes or no, you get to use your house and live in it. You put an investment account, you want to take out $10,000. You've got to go through that benefits trustee. They call the shots on whether or not you're receiving anything or being able to use anything. And that's part of what's keeping those assets separate from a whole host of potential liabilities, including divorce. Well, what are the other 2? There's the investment advisor. And we call it an advisor, but essentially it's almost working like a trustee. They can handle all the investments. They can make decisions on the buying and selling of assets inside an investment account. If there are businesses inside it, they can take charge of running it. And we'll show a little bit more about an additional layer around those business assets in a minute. So they're the ones who are managing all that stuff. That can also be you. So, yeah, you can't give yourself money, but you can control all of the assets that are and how they're being invested. Now, what's that third kind of trustee? It's the administrative trustee. And here's where in North Carolina, we don't have domestic asset protection trusts. They're sometimes called self-settled irrevocable trusts. You can't, in North Carolina, set up a North Carolina irrevocable trust, put your own assets in it, put another trustee in charge of it, you be the beneficiary, and go, yep, go ahead, sue me. You can't. Ha ha. That doesn't work. However, in Wyoming, you can. And so Wyoming's law has listed out, here's what you need to do in order for this trust to be governed by Wyoming law. So you need to have at least one trustee who is based in Wyoming, or if it's a company, they are transacting business and authorized to either a bank or a trust company under Wyoming law. Okay. They have to keep a copy of the trust and records, and they have to, quote, cause the tax returns to be done each year. They don't even have to do them. So, I mean, you could have an accountant, but you don't have to have an accountant do it. In fact, it's a company that's going to provide this type of service. But now suddenly that domestic asset protection trust is governed under Wyoming law. And it does provide you that protection from divorce. So those are those 3. Now, LLCs and corporations. If you're going to have businesses and you want to protect them, or you're going to have rental property and protect them, they should also be inside LLCs or corporations, whatever the accountant says is going to be the best form to do that, so that it's going to have another layer of protection from outside potential lawsuits. So, yeah, the trust should be enough, but these business entities should be out there transacting business as corporations and LLCs, so it has that corporate protection in that layer. Now, if you're running a business and it's inside a limited liability company, you can still be the manager. The member of the LLC is your benefits trustee on behalf of the trust, but you're still running the business part of it. Okay? If it's the corporation, well, the only shareholder would be that benefits trustee on behalf of the trust. So the stock is titled in the name of that domestic asset protection trust. Okay? You can still be the president and CEO. So you still have all of that control. But you do have, again, another layer of protection. So not if you're going through a divorce, Not only would your spouse have to get through the prenup, get through the limited liability company or corporation, and get through the trust. And now suddenly it's triply locked up. It's not just a prenup and, hey, we're going to fight the terms of the prenup. Those assets are not even in your control. How can the court really go after that without going through a whole bunch of immense hoops? It's I don't want to say it's impossible. I don't even necessarily want to say it's next to impossible, but oh my gosh, it's pretty darn difficult to get through all of that. So, yeah, the LLCs and corporations. Personal assets. Okay, so if you do have a house and it's not going to be in business, all right, you can put that into the domestic asset protection trust directly. Fine. You still have that layer of protection around it. And if it's from a spouse, you've got your premarital agreement stating that all of the assets of the trust are none of their business and it's separate. All right. But if you and your spouse are going to live in that house, well, why shouldn't your prenup also talk about things like rent and whatnot? And that's really the next point that I'm going to get to. The prenup should reference this domestic asset protection trust. You're not hiding the fact that you have it. You don't want to do that. What you want is for this to be nobody's business. And in the premarital agreement, it's going to state, yep, you're the beneficiary of this trust, and you're agreeing the assets in the trust are not the business of the spouse or anyone else. And if your spouse has a trust like that too, it shouldn't be any of your business. Fine. Details about splitting assets and expenses. This is where I've seen a lot of premarital agreements kind of fall short. There's, okay, you've got this list of separate assets, I've got this list of separate assets, and we're going to keep all that separate, and anything else that we get that's titled jointly, it's going to be joint. If we title it separately, it's separate. But then they don't really talk about how are they supposed to be paying the day-to-day living expenses. Well, that could be a whole big, huge difference. Oh, yeah, you keep your stuff, I'll keep my stuff, but husband, you're going to pay the mortgage on our joint house. You're going to pay for the groceries. You're going to pay for this. You're going to pay for this. You're going to pay for this. And I'm going to work and I'm just going to put my money away. Oh, no, 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 no. And by the way, it's the same thing. Every year, women are making more and more money, and that wage gap is kind of evening out a little bit. We're starting to see a lot more women as the breadwinners of the family, and they're going to want to protect their stuff the same way. Listing out how the expenses are going to be handled is just as important as keeping stuff separate. So, okay, yeah, the rent or the mortgage, whichever it's going to be, is 50-50 or 60-40 or 70-30, whatever you decide on, based on what your incomes are going to be. Listing that everybody keeps working and you keep contributing to these expenses. You want to quit your job? Okay, fine, but you're still responsible for those expenses. Start taking money out of your savings. So that's another big point, is the expenses in a premarital agreement. Your estate wishes should be completely separate, and the titling of your assets should line up with the prenup and your estate wishes. So let's talk just a little bit about that. In the domestic asset protection trust, you can list out who you want to be the beneficiaries after you're gone. And very, very typically, it's not the spouse, it's your kids. Because this is an irrevocable trust. There are other ways to take care of the spouse, and I'll just touch on that very, very briefly. I've got another whole YouTube video on that, or I don't know if it's a video, or at least I have a blog on that. So, you're leaving it to the kids. But in that domestic asset protection trust, one of the rights that you're reserving is the right under your will to have a power of appointment over those trust assets. So you can point them to your kids, or even better, you can point them towards those asset management trusts that we talked about. So now your kids are going to get their generation of protection as well. So, how do you take care of a spouse? Look, you can get an irrevocable life insurance trust or just a life insurance policy. If it's a life insurance policy, you direct it to a revocable trust, and that revocable trust will state, okay, I want this to go to this spouse, or I want it parceled out, or I want the trustee to use it strictly for their benefit over time until they pass on. But if we're divorced or separated at the time that I die and the insurance goes into the trust, they don't get anything. Fair enough. The other thing is you could use retirement accounts going into an IRA trust just for the spouse, where they'll receive distributions from that, but it's still also protected for them in the most tax advantaged way that it can be as a spouse. But it's still kind of locked up, so that if you can put in conditions on that, okay, if we're divorced or separated at the time that you pass on and it goes into that trust, they don't get it and it goes around to the other beneficiaries. So there are lots of good ways to provide for a spouse in a contingent way that's going to meet your goals, but it doesn't disrupt the main plan that's going to happen in your domestic asset protection trust. And then let me touch just quickly on the titling of assets. This is the biggest mistake that people will make. It's they'll start titling stuff jointly, and they're not even complying with what's in the premarital agreement. Well, in fact, the premarital agreements typically say if you decide to make something a joint account or a joint asset, then it is a 50-50 one, no matter where the money came from. You just have to be conscious and aware enough that if you're going to buy something new and it's with your funds, it's only titled in your name, or, like I said, better still, in that domestic asset protection trust. So who is this strategy for? Who are the clients that would get the most out of this? Well, it's business owners, either young and starting out, or the adult children of business owners that are your clients who are starting their own businesses or who are starting to get out on their own. So you've probably noticed there are some cases where the entrepreneurship just keeps going down generation to generation to generation. So yeah, your clients may want to have their inheritance go down to their kids, but their kids are out and doing stuff that's very valuable too. All right, they should be protecting their stuff in case they get married from the divorce, so that they can then plan to leave their stuff to their next generation and not have a roll of the dice, not even a roll of the dice, a flip of the coin of whether or not the marriage is going to work out and put those assets at risk. Second generation wealth, controlling money and assets now. So this is where maybe you've got some wealthy clients and they're starting to filter money and gift money down to the next generation through gifts, through family limited partnerships, through some other type of transfer of wealth mechanisms to get their estate lowered. That's in their hands already. That could end up being more vulnerable to a divorce or to commingling. They can put together their own plan so that their own wealth is growing, even if they're not those entrepreneur types. And then really any client who asks about marriage protection against divorce, this strategy is something that should at least be presented to them, because they can't make an informed decision unless they know all of the different facts and the tools that are out there. It would be in estate planning terms if someone came to you and said, look, I want a plan for my estate. I've heard horror stories about probate. I don't want my assets and my estate to go through probate. And you go, well, look at here, just have this will. No, you want to lay everything out. If they look through and go, okay, this is a lot more complicated than I thought it was going to be, okay, that's fine. But at least they've got the facts about it. So those are the people that the strategy is for. So what resources are out there? Well, look, my book, The Divorce Firewall Strategy, the Divorce Firewall Strategy, that goes through all of these different components in a little more detail, using some fictional examples and fictional characters to go through it. It's explained a lot better in the book than I can over a webinar or a podcast. So the book is available on Amazon, but the link just to Divorce Firewall. You take that website, that'll take you right over to where the book is for sale. Now, there's also domestic asset protection trusts are available in those states, but again, you can waive in through the estate planning source at www.theestateplanningsource.com. Now, right now, the coming soon, we're going to end up pretty soon having a launch of the Kindle version of the book. But then we're also going to put together a client online course that runs through this strategy with all the different examples and go into a lot more detail than even the book goes into in these particular areas, and potentially even have some sample language and sample scenarios to really explain it so that your clients can go through this course and really understand what's going on. All right, so with that, I'm going to say thank you. So thank you for attending this webinar. I hope you got a lot of good information out of it that you can bring to your clients. And like I tell my clients, please stay safe, plan ahead, and enjoy life. And whatever you do, make it a great day. Thank you.